Shana Tova. As most of you know, it is my tradition to start with baseball. So someone approached me after services on Rosh Hashanah and suggested, with the year the Cubs had, and the year the Giants had, and the year the Jewish people had, how about we just say this year didn't happen? I understand the sentiment. It was a very hard year, and we all pray for a better year ahead. But if we're going to look for a baseball metaphor, what I want to say tonight is that sometimes a hard year is what helps us clarify just how much we love our team. It was a hard year. A few months after October 7th, a new member of Kol Nidre told me that his 6-year-old son had said to him, "Daddy, I don't want to be Jewish." "Why do you feel that way?" asked the father. "Because people don't like Jews," he said, "and they don't like Israel. So why do I have to be Jewish?" Of course, the 6-year-old is not the only one asking these questions. On some level, I think we're all asking ourselves, what is this thing that I was born into, or married into, or converted into? This Jewish people, this Jewish religion, this Jewish state. Can I escape it? Would I want to? People do hate us more than I could ever imagine. So what do we do in the face of so much hatred, so much distortion of who we are? The answer of Jewish history is we don't give in to fear. We don't erase who we are. We keep on living proudly as Jews. Tonight, I want to share with you a few stories of people who have inspired me to live more proudly as a Jew and not be afraid. I want to begin with my own journey to Israel this summer and a confession that I was afraid to go. I have held Israel and Israelis in my heart and in my prayers every day this year. The first thing I do in the morning is read the news from Israel. The last thing I do most nights is read the news from Israel. And perhaps as a result of reading all that news, I was scared to get on a plane and go to Israel, even though I knew I wanted to. I wanted to show Israelis that we care about them. I wanted to see with my own eyes the destruction of October 7th. I wanted to breathe the air and see the limestone of Jerusalem, where I lived for a year of college and a year of rabbinical school. I wanted to see that Israel was still there. Friends of mine told me they were going to study at the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem in July, and I decided that would be my impetus to finally go. I would study with leading Israeli scholars, hang out with old friends, and surely come back with good material for high holiday sermons. All of that proved to be true. But as is often the case, it was the experiences outside of the formal program that were most impactful. My second afternoon in Israel, I was sitting in a lecture with Yossi Klein Halevi, and an old friend from rabbinical school texts me from across the room, saying that he and his wife have an extra ticket to the Hanan Ben Ari concert that night. Would I like to take it? I'm embarrassed to admit I had no idea who Hanan Ben Ari was. He's basically one of the biggest rock stars in Israel, a singer-songwriter who comes from a religious background, but who's really made it big in the Israeli secular world as well. I had no idea. I just figured it would be interesting, so I said yes. Next thing I know, I'm walking down to Sultan's Pool, an ancient water basin right beside the walls of the old city that's now a premier concert venue. As I passed through the not very thorough security entrance, along with what turned out to be 6,000 other concert goers, I suddenly wondered, is this safe? Am I crazy? What am I doing at a gathering of 6,000 people in a war zone? Where are the exits? Where would I run to? But then the band started playing. Hanan started singing, and the place just erupted. 6,000 people, hands in the air, clapping, singing, dancing, healing. How many had family members fighting in Gaza? How many had loved ones killed in the year gone by? But here they were, secular women in tank tops, Orthodox women in headscarves, Mizrahim, Ashkenazim, young and old, dancing. My body pulsed with the beat of the heavy bass. I felt it was the beating heart of Israel. At some point, a very sweaty Hanan Ben Ari got carried across a mosh pit of teenagers, and someone tossed him a bottle of water. He opened the bottle and, without skipping a beat, proclaimed the blessing one says over water. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shekol nidre bidvaro. To which the whole place proclaimed, Amen. As the moon rose over the old city walls and the concert continued, I thought to myself, this is the Jewish state, where 100 years ago, no one spoke Hebrew. And today, more than 7 million Israeli Jews and 2 million Israeli Arabs do. Where a pop star pauses mid-concert to say the Jewish blessing over water. And where, despite all the trauma and all the reasons to be afraid, our people are still singing. I know there are other sides of Israel, but this is also Israel. And getting to stand right in the middle of it all, it nourished my soul. As it turned out, singing was the theme of my next night in Israel as well. The week I was there, John and Rachel Goldberg-Polin called for it to be a week of kindness for the sake of all the hostages. And their community organized a Leil Shira, a night of singing at a big gathering place in Jerusalem. I decided to skip my evening lecture and go. People sang for hours, songs of Israel, songs of the Jewish people, and finally, Achenu, the prayer that has become an anthem for the hostages this year and that we will sing at the end of our service tonight. After all the singing, I recognized John Polin just standing around, and I decided to go talk to him. I told him I was from Palo Alto, and that all of us back here were holding Hirsch and their family in our hearts and prayers. He seemed genuinely touched. Then I mentioned that I went to Camp Ramah in Wisconsin, where I knew he also went as a kid. Next thing I know, he's asking, oh, do you know this person? Do you know that person? He clearly just wanted to be a normal person for a few moments. Rachel Goldberg Polin wasn't at the event, to my knowledge, but I've thought a lot about what I would want to say to her if I met her. I think she has been a role model for the world this year, with her relentless advocacy for her son and for all the hostages, with her bravery, her eloquence, her incredible resourcefulness. And she's been a role model for me in how she speaks as a Jew. She lifts up the Jewish values that I hope unite all people. The preciousness of every human life, the love of parents for children, the desire of all people to live in peace. And she also lifts up her Judaism, her faith in God, and her traditional Jewish practices as a source of strength, a source of hope, and a source of wisdom worth sharing. She taught Torah at the UN. She explained the Modeh Ani prayer on Fox News. She told the world about Shabbat, Purim, Passover, keeping kosher. She demonstrated that in our darkest times, we should not downplay our Judaism. We should lift it up and let it be our light. Rachel Goldberg Polin was more than a role model for us this year. She was really a rabbi for the world. Now I want to shift and tell you about another rabbi, one who walked through truly the darkest times of the Jewish people, and who also insisted that Judaism be his guide. Our fellow congregant Miriam Schulman introduced me this year to the work of Rabbi Ephraim Oshry, a young rabbi from Lithuania who ended up serving as the posek, the legal decision maker and spiritual leader for thousands of Jews in the Kovno ghetto during the Holocaust. He himself was subjected to 3 years of forced labor, witnessed unspeakable atrocities, and nearly died many times. Yet somehow he continued to teach Torah and give guidance on heartbreaking halachic questions and ethical dilemmas in the ghetto. May one save oneself by causing the death of a fellow Jew? Is it permissible to fast on Yom Kippur if you are already starving? I read with amazement as Rabbi Oshry described the community's efforts to have matzah for Passover. Several people risking their lives to smuggle flour into the ghetto, one tiny bit at a time. Rabbi Oshry preserved these questions and stories on scraps of paper torn from cement sacks, which he then buried in tin cans in the soil of the ghetto. His stated hope was that after the war, they would be found and serve as a historic record of how, no matter what, the Jews of the Kovno ghetto were determined to live by the laws of the Torah. Amazingly, Rabbi Oshry survived. He was indeed able to unearth his tin cans and proceeded to publish 5 Hebrew volumes of responsa from the Holocaust, as well as an abridged English version that I bought on Amazon. I think the most moving piece I read in the book was in the introduction, in which a story is told about Rabbi Oshry going to Christian orphanages after the war to look for Jewish children. Many doors were slammed in his face, and he was often threatened. But with some protection from a sympathetic priest, he continued to search. As the story is told, Rabbi Oshry and the priest went into a large Catholic orphanage, and the nuns insisted there were no Jewish children there. Nonetheless, they allowed Rabbi Oshry to come in for a few moments during lunchtime. "See," said the head of the orphanage, "they're all good Catholic children." Then Rabbi Oshry opened his mouth and sang the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And children started crying. Somewhere in the depths of their souls, they knew this was their song. Perhaps the song their parents sang to them before bed, the song their teacher taught them in preschool. That's how dozens, maybe hundreds of Jewish children were found. There's a prayer that I say every morning that appears right at the beginning of our morning prayers. It says, Ashreinu. How fortunate are we? Ashreinu ma tov chelkeinu ma na'im goralenu ma yafa yerushatenu. How fortunate are we? How good is our portion? How pleasant our lot? How beautiful our heritage? Ashreinu she'anachnu mashkivim u'marivim erev vavoker ve'omrim pamayim b'chol yom. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. How fortunate are we that twice each day, morning and night, we get to say, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. With Rabbi Oshry and his community and these children in mind, these words have new meaning to me. How fortunate are we that generation upon generation of our ancestors refused to let the Jewish light go out. How fortunate are we that our ancestors taught the Shema to their children, and those children taught the Shema to their children. And all these generations later, we're here tonight singing the Shema together on Yom Kippur. How fortunate are we to get to teach the next generation, our own children and grandchildren, and our collective children and grandchildren, to say the Shema, to live as Jews, to sing the songs of our people. I've been tremendously fortunate in my life to have many people who have imparted a love of Judaism to me. At the top of the list are my mom and my dad. I want to share a bit about my dad because I think his example is less expected. My dad grew up in Chicago. His parents and grandparents were Americans, Chicagoans, Cub fans. His family had Shabbat dinners on Friday night, but they were not traditionally observant. They didn't keep kosher. They were not big fans of going to synagogue. So it's always intrigued me that every morning since he was 13, my dad has put on tefillin and davened, prayed on his own in his bedroom. In preparation for this sermon, I asked him, "What made you start putting on tefillin?" "Well," he said, "I saw my dad doing it. I knew it was an expression of who he was, what he was committed to. Here was my father, this man of the world, a successful businessman, not a traditionally religious man. And I thought, he doesn't have to do this weird-looking ritual, but he chooses to do it. I wanted to emulate that." I also knew that living in America was a gift. I was born in 1944. I grew up just after the Holocaust, and I felt tremendously blessed not to live in fear as a Jew. I felt it was my duty to continue Judaism, both the religion and the peoplehood, the uniqueness of who we are. So I began to put on tefillin. It was a daily reminder that I was a Jew. I say the Shema. I think about people who are sick, people in my life who have died. I think about how grateful I am for my life, and then I start my day. My dad never told me or my brothers to put on tefillin. But somehow when I was 20, I too started putting on tefillin each morning. My dad also never told me until now what he thought about in those 10 or 20 minutes of davening each morning. But it turns out I do pretty much the same thing. Ashreinu, ma yafa Yerushatenu. How beautiful our heritage. How fortunate we are to rise each morning and say Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. So from my dad to me, now I want to turn to my daughter, Eliana. I almost didn't tell this story, as I feel like I've told a lot of stories about Eliana and my daughters in Yom Kippur sermons over the years. But I think this one is worth telling. I asked Eliana to write it down for me so that I could share it with you in her words. It's an experience that she had as a counselor at Camp Ramat Galim in Watsonville this past summer. Here is her account. Solalim, entering 7th and 8th graders, is the youngest age group that gets to stay for Big Kid Shirah, Shabbat singing at my camp. And my campers had just been introduced to the world of such ruach-filled, energetic Shirah. They immediately understood this was what the big kids loved so much about Shabbat at camp. My kids didn't know the words to most of the songs, but they got the spirit and were eager to lend their yainin eyes and banging on the tables to the din of happy, singing big kids. So my kids were crushed when the second Shabbat, Solalim got sent back to the bayit to go to bed before the singing began. Things had run late. It was close to 12 and 13-year-old bedtime. And so the people in charge sent Solalim to bed. It's not fair, my campers protested on the way back to the bayit, utterly bereft. I had to agree. Before I knew what I was saying, I huddled them up and said, anyone who wants to go to bed can go to bed. Anyone who wants to come to an optional bedtime activity can meet me at the outdoor dance stage in 10 minutes. We're going to sing. 12 girls showed up, still wearing their white Shabbat dresses. We didn't have songbooks, and they didn't know a lot of words. But we started with repeat after me songs. And before I knew it, they were singing on their own, holding hands, dancing in circles, jumping up and down, and having the time of their lives. When the singing finally died down, we sat in a circle, and I asked everyone to share a moment when they felt grateful or proud to be Jewish. Many of them said, right now. I did too. Then I decided to tell them a little bit about my experience in college last year. Friday nights were usually okay, but Saturdays could be very lonely. So sometimes I would sit on my own in my room with my songbook and softly sing Shabbat songs to myself, some of the same ones we had sung that evening. That's so sad, one of my campers blurted out. It's not sad, I told them, because as I sing, I imagine so many other joyful Jews out there singing along with me. And this school year, when we're away from camp and we don't have each other to sing with, we can still sing. And we'll know that somewhere out there are other Jews singing joyfully along with us. We're the joyful Jews, one of them declared. The name stuck. I try to write notes to my campers at the end of the session for them to read when they get back home. P.S. I signed them. Keep being a joyful Jew. Other joyful Jews are out there singing with you. A few days after Eliana came home from camp, I received a video on WhatsApp of some unexpected joyful Jews singing in Paris. The caption on the video was, Kiddush Bikfar HaOlimpi. Kiddush in the Olympic Village. As you may recall, there were numerous death threats against the Israeli Olympic team. I was terrified that the athletes and their families would not all come home alive. And here they were, gathered in the Olympic Village dining hall, singing Shalom Aleichem. 50 or so Israelis in their Olympic uniforms, wearing white kippot, singing Shabbat songs with pride. Some didn't know the words, but a surprising number of them did. The person taking the video eventually panned around the room, and you could see members of the Egyptian delegation at the next table over, just eating their dinner. Then he panned back to the Israelis, and you could see several of them wiping their eyes, all of them looking so proud to be a part of this. I think back now to the 6-year-old boy and his question, "Daddy, why do I have to be Jewish?" What I want to say to him, what I want to say to all of us, is we don't have to be Jewish. We get to be Jewish. We get to live in a time when there is a Jewish state. We get to fast on Yom Kippur and eat matzah and put on tefillin and say the Shema. And when times are tough, we get to sing the songs of our people and to know that other Jews are out there singing along with us. Today, we get to live as Jews. Gmar Chatima Tova. We're going to come around with little blue cards that say, "Today I get to live as a Jew." So you might be wondering why there are people standing before me looking like a Jewish acapella group. It's because we have one. So many of you heard our new Kol Nidre Jewish acapella group sing on Rosh Hashanah. I was very moved by their singing, and particularly their newest song, which is actually words that we say every morning just before the Shema. V'ha'er einenu b'toratecha, v'dabek libenu b'mitzvotecha. Enlighten our eyes with your Torah and attach our hearts to your mitzvot. Unify our hearts to love and revere your name so that we never lose hope. So I want to turn it over to some joyful Jews from our own community to lift us up.
One, two, one. B'toratecha, b'toratecha, b'dabek libeinu, b'mitzvotecha, במצוותיך ויחל לבבנו לאהבה וליראה את שמך ללא נבוש לעולם ועד ללא נבוש לעולם לעולם ועד והרננו לולולו בתורתך בתורתך ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך במצוותיך ויחד לבבנו לאהבה וליראה את שמך ללא נבוש לעולם ועד ללא נבוש לעולם לעולם ועד. נין נין בתורתך בתורתך ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך במצוותיך ויחד לבבנו לאהבה וליראה את שמך ללא נבוש לעולם ועד ללא נבוש לעולם לעולם ועד.
We'll return to our regularly scheduled program. Back to our Yom Kippur prayers. Page 222, actually, for the additions for Shabbat, we rise for Vayachulu, the words from the Torah proclaiming this to be Shabbat. 222. And by the way, for all those on Zoom, and I know we've got at least 120 screen households joining. If anyone wants a card, there are, I'm sure, several hundred more to be given out. Just come by the office or give me a call or an email. Everyone gets a card.